Hello and welcome to our first High Life Expo event. My name's Kate Nicolazzo. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Climate Change Agency, Let Me Be Frank, and I'll be hosting tonight and joined by two wonderful speakers who I'm going to introduce in a moment. We've partnered with Strata Communities Association Victoria on pulling together the High Life Expo, and this is our very first event for the 2004 program, so it's really exciting to have you all here with us. This entire sustainability event is all about bringing information, speakers, access to products, services, solutions for you, for people who are living in, owning, working, managing apartments and units in the strata sector, often a forgotten part of our sort of residential sector when we're thinking about sustainability and climate change. Obviously, I'd like to start by acknowledging country this morning. So I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. It's really important to us at Let Me Be Frank, working in climate change, and I'm sure everyone on the call who's here to talk about sustainability solutions, but acknowledging the fact that First Nations people have had and held such a long connection to country, to culture and community, and demonstrated for a very long time that sort of very strong connection and resilience. So we stand in solidarity with mob as they seek truth, treaty and justice. But tonight we're here to talk about waste, which is exciting, how to avoid it, how apartments, waste rooms and systems can be all reconfigured for better outcomes. Now, I know there's people here on the call from all across Australia, but obviously this event's being put on from Melbourne. So there's a lot of content that's very Melbourne specific, but there's also quite a few resources and there's opportunity for discussion as well to look at, you know, what sort of solutions work in a context outside of Melbourne as well. I'd just like to, you know, the High Life Expo is only free because we've had such generous support from our sponsors. So I'd like to thank our primary sponsors, Melbourne Building Management, Merri-bek City Council, City of Yarra and the City of Stonington, and all of our other sponsors and partners as well, because it's taken a lot of people to put this event together, which is really wonderful. Now, as I mentioned, tonight we're very lucky to be joined by two incredible experts in this space. So we've got Alice here, who's the consultancy manager at Reground. And Alice and her team at Reground have led, I would say, some of Australia's most progressive apartment waste and sustainability resource recovery projects. And they're going to share what they've learned over the last period of time and some of the incredible resources that they've started to build. So we're really lucky to have Alice here. Thank you. And we've also got Brett, who's the design director of Returnr, an innovative business which is working at the other end of the waste stream, so really helping people live a lower waste and hopefully packaging-free lifestyle. So welcome to Alice and Brett. I'm going to hand over to you in just a minute. Just before we do that, from a technology perspective, to make sure that we can run this session nice and smoothly. Hopefully everyone's familiar with how Zoom works by now. It's been a few years we've been operating like this, but there's two kind of key functions we'll be using tonight. One is the chat function. So if you've got a resource or an idea or a link you'd like to put up, something you'd like to share, feel free to put that into the chat function. And that will obviously go out to all the participants, but we'll be running the Q&A session through the Q&A function on the Zoom call. So that's where you can ask all your questions for the presenters. You can also vote for questions from other people in there. So it's got a little bit of additional functionality. I'll be using the Q&A function to make sure that I'm hopefully not missing any of your questions. And hopefully that all makes sense. And I think that's it. I'm just checking my list. I am going to now hand over to Alice from Reground to take us through what's been happening at Reground. Thanks, Alice.
Thanks, Kate. Super excited to be here. We're just chatting before, and I think we've got a great source of knowledge, so definitely put into those questions into the chat. But I will start with discussing who Reground are, what we do, particularly as if you go outside of Victoria, you might not have heard of us. We're a certified social enterprise. So through Social Traders, we're certified, and a lot of our work is really community involved. So how our business kind of started was looking at how can we divert coffee grounds that typically are thrown out into landfill and cafes. How can we divert those into community gardens and really make use of this resource and make it as hyper-local as possible, so keeping those benefits in the community. So today we collect coffee chaff, which is like the husk of coffee grounds from roasteries, and soft plastic, and we recycle those or divert it back to the local community. But another part of what we do, and something that I'm super passionate about, is our work in the waste and recycling space, and particularly focusing on education and system change within this. So something that we've done a lot of over the past about 5 years is look at waste and recycling management in multi-unit dwellings. So it's, I guess, something that we've found is it's a really complex issue. Every apartment building is different, residents are different, demographics are different. So it's something that we've really enjoyed getting to understand and do testing and feasibility studies in, and look at how we can improve those spaces for residents. Thanks, Kate. So just a bit more background, just here's some of the things in action. So we're female founded as well. So Nina, who started Reground, it's actually our 10-year birthday this year. So super exciting. It's pretty incredible to see what we've done in this past decade. But you can see we've done a lot of community engagement with local cafes, businesses, but a lot of partnerships with local and state government as well, and with organisations. And that's allowed us to be able to get on the ground, get data. A lot of it, waste audits we do, for example, we're literally digging through bins and getting data there. So everything we do is kind of backed by what we see out in the real world, and we try to create change solutions that really match that and match what's going to see an impact in the world as well. Thanks, Kate. Great. So bit of background on me. My name's Alice. I'm currently the consultancy manager at Reground. I've been here for a bit over 2.5 years, and a lot of my work, I guess we've spanned across a lot of different projects. So I've done work with schools, with organisations. I've been in a lot of waste rooms, done a lot of waste auditing, but my particular passion area is within multi-unit dwellings, and how can we increase recycling streams in these spaces. Something that I think is really important to focus on in multi-unit dwellings is it's something we're going to see more of in the future as cities expand. And there's just such a great opportunity for us to really target these areas in terms of education, getting more recycling streams in, and really importantly, educating people on how we can avoid and reuse waste in a way that's sustainable for the future as well. So we kind of see them as almost mini cities is how we call it, because you have a group of people all in one place, and it's such a great opportunity to get the infrastructure and system change and behaviour change right. So it's definitely a reason that I'm really passionate and really excited to be here tonight. Thanks, Kate. Awesome. So we've done a lot of different projects with apartment buildings, and this has ranged from small to large scale. So smaller scale might look like, for example, we've had OC committees, or what we call waste champions. So people who are really passionate members of their building reach out to us and say, hey, we have these issues, or we're just looking to increase our resource recovery from our building and improve our environmental footprint. How can you help us? But then we've also done bigger projects with up to, for example, we just wrapped up a project with 60 apartment buildings across 10 councils. So it was council funded and also funded by Sustainability Victoria. And within each of those, we worked with each of those apartment buildings individually, each of their OC committees, to put in new education and new bins where possible. So we've got a broad depth of who we've worked with. But typically our process for working with apartment buildings is when we come in, we want to do a site assessment. Because like I said before, each apartment building is so uniquely different. This could be because they have an outdoor waste space, or they might be council service versus privately serviced, which really changes what recycling stream they might get access to automatically. Could mean that they have a smaller waste space, or they have chutes, for example. So understanding the infrastructure and also the context of how residents engage with the waste space is really important. So we come in to do that site assessment when we're working with any kind of apartment building. And we really encourage a waste audit as well. So the purpose of this is to understand the behaviours of residents and how they use your bins. So, for example, some apartment buildings might say, hey, we've already got a food waste bin, for example. We don't need, like, that's working fine. We don't need an education for it. But then we go into the waste audit and we realise that there's actually still plenty of food waste ending up in the general waste bin, and it's not making it to that food waste bin to be recovered. So from there, we might look at, okay, how can we help to improve that within the building and make the most out of these recycling streams? So waste audits give us a really good in-depth and detailed insight into the building. After that, what we do is give recommendations to OC management and the OC committee to say, this is what we recommend installing for your building. So we want to make sure we're aligned with the goals of the committee and working with them to make changes that they want to see in the future. So providing their waste audit data and recommendations that we'd see from that to get their approval to make the next changes, which is the fun part, looking at installation. So my favourite part is when we can get some new bins in. Often we try to reduce general waste. General waste has the highest waste levies, and it's also the last bin we kind of want to be using. So trying to get more recycling streams in and making the waste area behaviourally appropriate for residents to use as well. So for example, sometimes what we do, if the building's doing quite well generally with recycling, but might have some contamination issues, or for example, aren't using the bins as much as they should, we might put general waste at the back. So it's like kind of the last bin you might be accessing, and really encouraging people to utilize all those recycling streams they have first. So doing little things like that can really make a huge difference. We also put up new signage to make it really clear what can and can't go into each bin. And we make sure everything's colour coordinated with the Victorian standards. So looking at making sure the bin lids are the right colours, the signage matches the bin lids, and the floor markings are also colour coordinated and keep those bins in the same spot. It sounds really simple, but honestly, when you have these little changes in waste rooms and people using them on day to day, it makes all the difference when looking at behaviour change and setting those habits. And also it looks really fun and engaging. You're not walking into just a bland waste room. You've got all the colours and you know exactly how to separate your waste. So it's the ideal. And then alongside this, something that's really important, and it was actually a really interesting discussion we just had before we jumped into the webinar, but how important education is. So you can't just set up these systems and have the infrastructure. You really need to make sure that you've got the right education that follows it as well. So people really understand the importance of what they're doing. And sometimes with buildings, we do targeted education campaigns, depending on what we might find in the waste audit or what the OC committee reports back to us about specific problems, so how we can help address that. And of course, something we try to do at Reground is make it as fun as possible. So I think a good example of that is, say, for example, you have a lot of online deliveries in your apartment building, which tends to be quite common. How can we make sure that people are flooding their boxes? So a fun one that we were trying to do was get people to stomp on their boxes as well, and make it kind of a campaign on that. So it doesn't have to be, oh, you know, go to the effort of cutting up your boxes. You can actually stomp it and make kind of like a fun one and get kids involved, that kind of thing. So thinking about innovative ways that you can make the waste room work for your building and also fun, and kind of has that little memory trick to it as well. And then finally, what we want to do is just monitor these changes and make sure that what we've implemented works really well for the building and is something that's long-term. And despite changes to the building, the turnover of residents, it's something that will stick and make sense. Thanks, Kate. Great. So I wanted to walk through quickly. We've done a couple of case studies, and it's actually perfectly aligned. This this specific building is the Rochester. It's on Johnson Street in Fitzroy. So this was a part of the larger project I mentioned earlier with 60 apartment buildings, and this one specifically is in Yarra City Council. So we followed, as you can see, under the how we did it, a very similar process as to what I just walked through. And this building, when we came, it was a recent build. They're privately serviced. So how because they have a difficult access point, they're privately serviced, and they originally had just a general waste bin and a mixed recycling bin, so just the red and yellow bin when we originally came to the building. And then as part of the project, we implemented new streams, which I'll show a picture of in a second. But something that I guess really stood out for this building was, one, they had a great space to be able to utilise and put new bins into, and a really engaged OC committee. So we actually were able to see great results from this in a short period of time. We did a waste audit at the beginning, and about 10 to 12 months later, we did a follow-up one after we'd done all the installation engagement with residents. And we saw an increase of 31 to 56% more waste being recycled rather than being sent to landfill. So a really positive outcome, and I think just the beginning for that building as well. A lot of these system changes do take time for people to really coin on and make a full change in sort of how they're separating waste. But seeing that over a short period of time was really positive to see. And another cute one, if you can see the review down the bottom, we had someone from an Airbnb send a review in, and it was just kind of funny because it was, they highlight, if you have read down there, that the waste room was the highlight of their trip to that Airbnb. And what I love about that is often waste gets kind of put to the back of the mind, but they really brought it to the front. So it was great to see that making a waste room fun and engaging has so many benefits than just diverting waste from landfill as well. Thanks, Kate. Awesome. So here's a quick picture of it. You can see that these are all the additional streams that we installed. So to begin with, they only had mixed recycling and general waste, but we installed cardboard and paper, food organics, a clothing donation bin. They had battery recycling. That one was resident managed. They had their own little container and they took that themselves to their local supermarket or Officeworks. They had an e-waste bin, a glass, and a soft plastic as well. And they also had chutes, but I think towards the end of that program, they were really encouraging their residents to just take any recycling down to the waste room directly, because they had all these different streams to recycle with. And I guess one other thing that they did was have a waste room opening party, which was more than just adorable. It meant that people had an opportunity to come together and learn about all these different streams and really celebrate the work that the building did. So really putting some pride into it was awesome. Awesome. Another one from this project was a council service building in Marybeck. So this case study, they had the 4 bins which Marybeck have rolled out. So it's general waste, mixed recycling, and they've also done glass recycling and food and garden organics. So they had all 4 streams. So at the beginning, they just had the general waste and recycling, and by the end of the program, council had installed the additional glass and FOGO bins. So FOGO stands for food organics and garden organics. So again, we followed a very similar process. We put in new signage, as you can see, onto the bins. Here was a bit different to the last one. We had a much, much older multi-unit dwelling. Theirs was also kind of low rise, just 2-story, and had a unit block. So how we put up signage had to look a bit different, and how we engage with residents was also quite different. But something really positive that we saw from rearranging the bins and putting up signage was that we had a decrease in recycling contamination from 33% to 4%, which is a huge drop, and something that's really positive for the outcomes when council comes to collect it. Having too high a contamination just means it's too difficult for them to sort. So ideally you want it well below at least 3% for that to be collected. Thanks, Kate. Great, and here's a picture. So you can see how we've put this, as I can see the general waste is at the back. So trying to encourage people to utilize those bins that they have first to recycle. And you can see originally, I guess the bin corral was much smaller when they had fewer bins. So looking at how we can retrofit that and make that space work for an older building, and that it's been able to work really well and have those shared bins. So in this case, not every unit has their own bin, but we were able to utilize it so they were sharing, and it made sense for their space and their waste needs too. Thanks. So looking at our top tips for owners corporations, we have a lot of these discussions, and I think the first one that I would say is, as much as you can, and I know sometimes when you might say deem yourself as a waste champion and not everyone, it might feel like in your committee cares as much as you do, but trying to prioritize these conversations as much as possible, even if it means just bringing it up every OC committee meeting you have, making sure that it's not something that's pushed to the back. And I think something else that I've learnt from hearing how these conversations sometimes go is that people are quite adverse to change in general, whether it's a cost issue or just not wanting to change their systems. Something that you can do is look at, can you do a trial, for example? So for some of our buildings, we've done feasibility studies where we're testing what works and what doesn't. sometimes the property's been like, oh, I'm not sure if we're ready to make that change yet. And it's like, no worries, how about we just trial it? So they have 2 recycling bins, for example, mixed recycling bins. Can we make one of those a cardboard and paper only bin temporarily? So they're both still being collected as mixed recycling, but can we see if residents are able to make that change if we put up the appropriate education and tell people how to go about this? And then even doing something like a trial to see how that works for the building can then often ease people's doubts about how it looks. And it's a great way to see, let's just test it and then go forward from there. Because once it's in and people kind of establish the behavior change with it, it becomes a lot less daunting, I've found as well. As a side note, definitely see if you can get cardboard and paper bins into your building. They are a cheaper stream if you're privately serviced, so I do encourage that one. But yeah, and be open to changes, because a lot of these systems are changing around us, so it's a great time to action it. The second one is assess and speak to your waste contractor. So just remembering that you are a paying customer, and if you're privately serviced, it's really important that they should be able to provide everything that's sort of promised to you in that contract too. So requesting as much transparency and data as possible. If there's contamination in your mixed recycling, for example, they should really be reporting that back to you each time so that you can kind of action that with your residents. So making sure that that line of communication is there and strong. And if you're not happy with how they're feeding back or telling you where their waste is going, I would definitely recommend looking around or getting in touch with us to see how you can find one that's better suited to your environmental goals too. And third would be create a community notice board or building communication channel. So this is a great point that people can share information, resell or share on items or reuse tools, and also share waste education tips. So having an online communication channel or a notice board works really well. And last one is get creative with how you look at disposal or recycling of waste. So see what's in your community. You might be able to find if your council does certain collection points, or there are other collection points like e-waste and batteries that you can find within your community as well. Or can other people in your building use what you might think is throwawayable? Can they also make use of it as well? So get creative and think about how you can reuse in your building too. Thanks, Kate. Awesome. And then finally, what I was going to touch on was looking at some resources. So I know that I've sort of whizzed through a lot of information here, and I definitely recommend I'll put our kind of Reground contact if you do have more questions in after this. But there are some really great resources online that we've just put out through that project I mentioned with the 10 councils and Sustainability Victoria. So we created from this project best practice guides, and these are really targeted to OC committees, OC managers, waste champions, really anyone who's looking to improve the resource recovery in their apartment building. And we've got a range, so looking at explaining why resource recovery in buildings is really important, looking at how you can get a new recycling stream into your building. So if you're looking to get food waste, for example, what's the best way you can do that? Encouraging people to recycle food waste is another one. Looking at if your building is privately serviced, how you can get in a private waste contractor. We also have information there if you are council serviced but are looking for more recycling options, what you can do there too. Looking at how you can set up a successful resident communication channel and how you can set up your internal bin system inside so it matches what's on the outside in your waste room and make that really efficient. And then finally, how you can dispose of hard waste correctly and again in a creative way. So I've put down there a QR code. This will take you to Sustainability Victoria's asset library. You do need to create a login for it, but otherwise you just need to make an account and you should be able to access it from there and you can see all those guides. But otherwise, you're very welcome to reach out to us at Reground. We, like I said, are very passionate in this space and more than happy to assist with any questions too. But thank you so much.
Just did that classic thing where I was muted. Thank you, Alice. There's some questions and some comments coming through. We're going to save questions until the next section, but Alice, you might want to have a look through some of the comments so we can, when we regroup after Brett's presentation, you could share your reflections on some of that. I've also written down about 13 questions. So I'm sure we've got plenty, and we've got plenty of time. So please don't, please, whoever's been putting questions in the Q&A or in the chat, comments in the chat, please don't fear that I will not ignore your questions. We will get to them. But before we do, I would love to hand over to Brett, who's going to tell us a bit about Returnr and that idea around how another, I guess, method for reducing waste in apartment buildings. Over to you, Brett.
No worries. That was awesome, Alice. Really tough act to follow. Yeah, so at Returnr, our focus is on waste elimination and through circular behaviour and reuse. Thanks, Kate. So we primarily design and develop reusable packaging, specifically reusable packaging that's designed for shared reuse rather than individual reuse. And we have lots of different businesses within our business and lots of different ways that we interact with customers. And so tonight I just want to share with you sort of one specific element of that relates to apartment living. Thanks, Kate. So why eliminate packaging waste in the first place is sort of one of the questions. Like why would you bother changing behaviour, investing time, investing money? And these are some snippets of quotes and bits and pieces that are maybe a little bit oversimplified, but long story short, plastics recycling especially doesn't work. And when I say it doesn't work, you're looking at roughly 5% of plastics is recycled per annum, and that's also after 30 to 40 years, probably even longer actually, of recycling trying to be implemented and trying to be improved on year. And I think when you look outside of plastics, there's lots of recycling that works really well, but plastic recycling particularly is quite problematic. And then also more recently, we're starting to see all the issues with the health effects of plastic packaging in the food space as well. So you've got the issues of microplastics that are being found in people's hearts and everything else, and then also the issues of forever chemicals like PFAS, which are found on some biodegradable packaging and other plastic packaging as well. Thanks, Kate. So we primarily design our products out of stainless steel. Our main container products are stainless steel, and stainless steel is probably the most incredible material that I've ever come across. And I'm trained as an industrial designer and mechanical engineer. I've been designing products for a long time, probably over 15 years. And it's only in the last 4 to 5 years that I've really come to learn how incredible stainless steel is and how incredible metals are as well. They naturally contain a really high percentage of recycled content. They can be recycled infinitely, and that's recycled back into themselves. So you can take an aluminium bike and recycle it and make an aluminium bike out of the same material. The same with our containers. They can be recycled back into the same container. And they have globally as well, not just in Australia, but all around the world, they have really high collection rates and recycling rates. And that primarily is driven by the fact that it's cheaper and better for the environment to recycle stainless steel than it is to make it from new virgin material from ore. So that drives, which is almost the inverse for most materials. Most materials, it's more expensive and less efficient to recycle than to make virgin material, which is why there's a natural disincentive. But with steel, there's this natural economic and environmental incentive to recycle. And so the material has a value, after it's used, it has a value. So you can take it to a scrap metal yard and be paid to recycle the material, which is fantastic. And then from a usability point of view, especially in shared reuse, it's super hygienic and doesn't retain odors and stains. So you can have a container in your home that has food in it that then gets sent back to us. We wash that container, wash it and sanitize it, and then that container can be used to actually hold a completely different food type, which is what we do in our grocery business. So we have coffee in canisters, and then the next week we'll have nuts in them, and they could go to a different home. And we really couldn't execute that if we weren't working with stainless steel, because it is so odor and stain resistant. Thanks, Kate. So the sort of, if we look at most professionals, there's two halves to how you can have the most impact with single-use packaging that we consider, and one is at home and the other's at work. And so tonight I'm going to focus on the at-home side of the equation. And so the majority of, if we're talking about at work, the majority of single-use packaging is takeaway packaging, that's a combination of biodegradable and plastic packaging waste. And a lot of people have a huge in their workplace. And then if we look at in the home, the majority of single-use packaging and especially plastic packaging comes from grocery shopping. And so if we look at the average Australian household, which is I think it's either 2.1 or 2.2 people per household, that average household has a plastic packaging waste of 215 kilograms per annum, and that's only from grocery shopping. So that's, in addition to that, is other forms of plastic packaging for e-com purchasing and other bits and pieces. And when you think about how lightweight most plastic packaging in the grocery sector is, 215 kilograms is a huge amount of weight, and that's, you know, per annum. And, you know, to put in context some of the carbon footprint that we have when we consuming packaging, I love the stat of the carbon emissions from a single bottle of wine is 1.1 kilograms of carbon. And that's not the carbon emissions from producing a wine bottle. That's the difference in carbon emissions between using a wine bottle and throwing it out, or washing a wine bottle and reusing it. And so part of our grocery business, Returnr Marketplace, one of the things we do is we offer wine with reusable glass bottles. And so you can have not only by eliminating single-use packaging waste, you can not only have a huge impact on reducing waste and reducing the need for recycling and waste management streams, but you can also have a huge impact on reducing carbon emissions and your carbon footprint as well. Thanks, Kate. So our at-home offer is called Returnr Marketplace. And basically what we do there is we do zero waste groceries delivered to your door. Currently this service is offered in Melbourne only, and we take orders online. We deliver groceries to households in reusable containers, and then you can hold on to those containers as long as you like, whether it's a day, a week, a month. When you place future orders, we come and collect any empty containers. So all of the orders are delivered in a reusable tote bag, and then those tote bags are used to put out any empty containers on the doorstep, and we collect any empties and take them back to our warehouse, where we then wash, sanitize, and then sort and repack and refill containers. The system is a membership-based system, so we have a monthly membership fee, and that helps cover the cost of container collection and washing and everything else. And then outside of that, it operates, other than the membership component, it operates just like purchasing groceries from any other normal grocer online, that you just log on, place an order for whatever you want. It gets delivered to you, and then you just put out your empties and we collect them. We deliver currently on a Monday and a Friday. So we've got the 2 delivery days. So the idea there is one just before the weekend and one just after the weekend. And you can have as many deliveries as you like, or as few deliveries as you like, as part of your membership. And we've tried to make the system as similar as we could to traditional grocery purchasing. So the idea being that adoption of the system is as easy as possible, and there's as little behavior change required as can be. Another element of the offer is we've tried to design and develop containers that are not only reusable, but also improve functionality for the customer. So we tried to enhance shelf life, enhance functionality. So we have olive oil bottles with a pourer, we have measuring cups, etc. So we tried to sort of enhance the experience rather than just imitate the single-use packaging. Thanks, Kate. And then our workplace offer, which I won't go into in huge detail, is we have several different ways we implement it in workplaces, but one of the ways is with our workplace micropool that encourages shared use of reusables for takeaway food and beverage consumption to eliminate packaging waste. Thanks, Kate. And so if we look at our Returnr Marketplace, it's a membership-based service. It's Melbourne only currently, delivered to your door every Monday and Friday. And I've actually written that twice because it's super important there, delivered to your door every Monday and Friday, just to make sure we get that right. And the empty container collection and washing service is part of that membership and part of what we do. And another sort of core element of Returnr Marketplace, which is quite, I quite enjoy it, is because of the way we've structured the business, all of the businesses and brands that we supply, so all of the producers who produce all of the products are super local. And when I say super local, virtually every single brand is Victorian based, and it's almost a requirement of the system because of the way in which we receive product from suppliers and pack, and we try not to have huge amounts of stock and huge amounts of product on the shelf. But that's actually a really nice element in not only supporting local businesses, but also further reducing the carbon footprint and the environmental impact of the whole system, because we're dealing with super local brands and businesses. Thanks, Kate. So how do you start? So with Marketplace, you sign up as a member and you start placing orders. And we've got a link there, a URL link. But also, if you go to the next slide, Kate, there's a sort of a three-step process to sign up, which is one, you become a member. So you basically sign up for a monthly membership, or we've got the price there per week. You can cancel that anytime. If you cancel it before you've ever made a purchase, it's simple, straight cancellation. If you cancel after you've made a purchase and received product, we just have a process we go through to get any empty containers back from you, or sometimes people choose to purchase containers from us if they want to keep them. But you cancel anytime, and as soon as you've emailed us to cancel, the date of the email is the cancellation date, and we just work through the process of getting the containers returned. You place orders online, so we've got an online store that you just scroll through. Everything's categorized. It basically functions very similar to most online supermarket offers. There's no minimum order value, and there's a small flat rate delivery fee of $6.95. We do have one order cutoff time, which is 4 p.m. the day before delivery. So you can order any single day of the week, but if you want Monday delivery, you have to place that order before 4 p.m. on Sunday. And then also, if you want Friday delivery, it needs to be by 4 p.m. On the Thursday. And then we deliver and return all in the one trip. So we basically deliver your order, and in the same trip we pick up any empty containers that you might have there. And
I think my headphones just died there, so sorry. So can you still hear me, Kate?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah, I was just about to unmute myself to let you know that we couldn't hear.
Awesome, fantastic. Yeah, so what we've had to do there too with the sort of a part of, to give you a bit of insight into the back end logistics of the business, the delivery and return element of the business was the part that was really challenging to sort of launch, and we worked really hard with lots of logistics to try and get that up and running. And basically we couldn't get anyone who was willing to do that for us, or to do it for us at a price that was anywhere near reasonable. And so what we've ended up doing is we basically do it ourselves. We have vans and we have our own team and we hand deliver. And what that's created though is it's created a service that's very it's very hands-on, and we're very closely, we have a very close relationship with all of our clients. And so what that also enables us to do is really enables us to cater towards apartment building residents as well, because often what we found in the early days is, you know, sometimes apartment buildings aren't always as straightforward when it comes to delivery and collection, because you might have, you know, private doors that open onto shared hallways and common areas, and so that I think is something where our service is really quite good, because because we have our own drivers in the vans who get to know the customers, they get to know the apartment buildings, they get to know all the little quirks of, oh, you know, you've got to leave this order here, or you've got to, you know, knock, or you've got to deliver to Mary at a certain time of the day. So we can sort of provide that sort of next level of service, which helps make the wheels turn and work for some of those buildings that are a little more challenging than just a normal you know, detached house, perhaps. Yeah. So that's sort of the way we do zero waste in apartment buildings and homes. And the other thing too that I'd encourage people to do as well is there's our service, and we're more than happy for you to sign up. You know, hit the link on the previous slide and sign up and become a member, and we'll deliver to you. But also, we'd encourage people to try and look at other ways to get zero waste grocery shopping into your weekly routine. And even if that's not the whole of your grocery shop, even if it's just, you know, going to your local market, if you're near South Melbourne Market or Vic Market, going there to buy all your fruit and veg. And also you can take containers to purchase things like olives and maybe your cheeses and other things. Take reusable containers and fill them and bring them back, and really try to minimize the waste wherever you can. And I think that probably the biggest headache with things like markets is that, you know, not everyone has the time to, you know, go there. And that's sort of where our offer comes in and tries to be that, you know, online shopping experience without the packaging waste, basically.
I'm a Returnr Marketplace customer, and I live not very far from the Preston Market, Brett, and I can absolutely attest that to the online shopping without the guilt of having all the packaging that comes when you occasionally have to do a Woolies order or something like that, is absolutely astronomical. I was going to say with your photo as well, our biggest product I think is the Merited Scots cheese. So I didn't see that in your picture, but I think our family goes through many jars of the Merited Scots cheese.
Yeah.
I love the fact that we can return that, and it's not yet another jar that I'm collecting, thinking I'll use that in some way, shape, or form at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Just brilliant.
Quickly, sorry to cut you off.
No, I'm going to wrap up because we're a little bit over time, and
sure.
There's quite a lot of questions, so I just want to make sure we get. Is it last point, or was there anything else? Sorry, Brett.
I was just going to say the most pleasurable thing about being a marketplace customer is the day when all the empties go. Even though we designed it, I didn't expect that to be the point of pleasure.
Absolutely, that overwhelming feeling.
Absolutely love it. You put all the bags out and they vanish, and you're like, it's fantastic.
It's so true. It's absolutely true, which is another advantage for apartments as well, who don't feel like they've got the space to collect jars. I guess we just wanted to pop up this slide because I think that just in that spirit from looking at other opportunities for zero waste shopping, just that there are other solutions out there. There's companies like Zero Co, obviously, where they have you know, cleaning products and beauty products and those sorts of things. And then there's that reusablenation.com. It's just because obviously Returnr is an incredible solution if you're in Melbourne, but there are sort of other growing numbers of solutions in other places as well. Now we've got about 15 minutes for questions, so which is brilliant. And I'm just going to note that Alice has been responding to some as we've been talking, which is really great. I'm not sure from those responses, Alice, was there anything that you wanted to share more broadly as well? Because I noticed that you've answered quite a few questions in the chat, in the typing, but just in case there was anything else that you thought you might want to share specifically.
Yeah, there was a few that was sort of difficult to type. I guess one is if you're finding that your contractor isn't being transparent, or it looks like they're collecting waste in the same truck, I would definitely recommend having a look into our best practice guides. We have a process of how you can go about what kind of questions you should ask, And I've put our email, our contact. If you have any difficulties accessing this, we can definitely send it to you. But investigating that, also reach out to us because it is a space that we're working in quite closely. So there's a few questions in on contractors and their kind of ethicalness in terms of like how ethical they are in terms of recycling, but then also a few on disengaged OC committees and disengaged residents.
Yeah.
It's a space that we're working super closely, and it's something that I think what is lacking at the moment is that we don't have sort of a holistic package for apartment buildings in terms of you've got your contractors. Sometimes if you want multiple recycling streams, you have to get different contractors in because they can't all do it all. And the other side of it is the education and the management of that waste stream itself. It's a service that we're kind of looking at the moment at Reground, how we can kind of tie this all in together. So I guess there was a lot of different questions that kind of all came back to that point. So I do want to say, if you have that question and it looks like if you're on this, you're definitely one of our waste champions, absolutely reach out to us directly, because we can give you a much more tailored response to your building. It was a bit hard to navigate each of those individually, but yeah, definitely reach out to us because it's a space that we're working in quite closely and are very aware that it's a problem for many.
Yeah.
Did you want me? There's another one I could answer, but I'm very happy to hand back to you if there was any.
No, that's all right. I was just going to start working through the list. So I don't, you feel free to pick it up and run with it.
Yeah, another one that I thought was interesting was one about like how do you sort of approach waste education in the waste room. So the question was, can you have the very positive message, neat, right coloured bins and markings, and then also have the negative messages like no plastic bags in the recycling bin? Does having both kinds of messages work, or is this too confusing? I think from the buildings I've worked with, I really try to take the positive approach recently. We've had more success with that, looking at how can we engage residents in the impact of their buildings. So I know Sandra's online at the moment, and I think something that's great at the Rochesters, they obviously have a very engaged OC committee, but even trying to engage the residents outside of that, or like their Airbnb people that come stay, they present their waste data and their findings and show that, hey, this doesn't just all go to landfill, we're really tracking this and showing that we are diverting waste from landfill and having this positive connection to our building and the environment. So I think trying to tie people in like that. Another great one study that we did recently, we wrapped it up middle of last year, was looking at different kind of signage and how can we engage residents from perspective of personalizing material. So it's saying, so for example, 95%, again, the problem was they had a lot of contamination in their recycling bin in terms of people putting recycling in plastic bags. And so instead of, like this question said, no plastic bags, it was a sign that said, hey, 95% of people at this specific building are doing the right thing and putting in their recycling loose. Make sure that, you put this in loose, because if you put it in a plastic bag, it will contaminate the bin. So it's really trying to highlight that, hey, majority of your building are doing the great thing.
Sort of setting those social norms for what's happening
exactly
in the building. Yeah.
You're that 5%, you're kind of the odd one out. So trying to change that wording, because I think sometimes when it's all really negative and harsh and people are just like, I'm just not even going to engage with it entirely. I guess in some instances with dumping, I know it's a real cost for buildings. It can be an issue, and things like CCTV might be necessary or harsher penalties. But I think if you can, trying to start with that more positive engagement first is how I'd like to approach it.
And then potentially, I think that work that you're doing to kind of capture that data and get a bit of a baseline and being able to communicate that around where your contamination rates are at the moment, what we're aiming for, all of those sorts of things as a way of kind of onboarding and seeing it as a bit of a change process. Sounds like I had written down that question as well. What is it, a carrot or a stick? Can you do both? But I think that it sounds like that's at least it's the best way to start the process. Although possibly frustrating, because it feels like there are some questions in there about CCTV and that idea around a bit of monitoring around that. So it's probably some people who've been trying to do this for a while who are feeling a little bit frustrated. Any advice in that kind of context? I guess if people have been trying to do this education for a little while and they need to, maybe it's a refresh or a reset on it.
Yeah, definitely. I think I totally understand that some buildings are much harder than others. We've done, like I said, a range of different work with different buildings, even a lot of work with social and affordable housing. I guess if you've got, say, really high turnover and it's really hard to engage residents in that space, how I would look at it is looking at infrastructure and, okay, how can we shape it in a way that really encourages no contamination in bins for people who really want to utilize those streams and really want to recycle. And then how do you make it, if they're not going to recycle correctly, how do you make it as easy as possible for them to just use general waste? And I know it's not the ideal, but it's better to have contamination-free recycling options that are actually going to be recycled properly and people can be satisfied with that than having recycling bins that, just are going to have to be sent to landfill because the whole building's not using it correctly. So I think if you have to start there and then start working forward. So, for example, like I was saying, we had bins at the back of the waste room, the general waste bins, but do you have to put them at the front and then have like a recycling separation station at the back for people who really want to do it and making it really clear that, hey, if you don't want to recycle, just use this one. But if you do, please like utilize this properly. I guess how it started. It doesn't sound the most progressive, but it also makes people kind of start thinking about it and having these conversations more. So it's also can be a really positive step.
That communication around the social norms and things, Brett, feels like you could do a bit of campaign work as well around that, especially if you've got some of that data around how much people's carbon footprint's been reduced by using your services and those sorts of things. If you had some big buildings who were starting to use your service, you could actually do some really nice messaging and a campaign around that as well, couldn't you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think it's and I saw a comment in the chat about reduction in waste management costs as well. And I think that's but the reduction in carbon footprint can be quite huge from a household waste point of view. And then also it's probably more appropriate in an apartment setting that the cost of waste management can be reduced, you know, if a significant number of people cutting back their single-use waste. And then also if people are also recycling and sorting and managing that whatever waste they have better, the overall cost of what's going to landfill can be cut down, you know, whether it's size of bins reduced or whether it's number of collections. And I think too that people respond to, you know, hip pocket motivation more than anything really. And that's actually sort of something that we spend a lot of time on, is trying to figure out how to make systems financially beneficial to customers, you know, because that drives behavior.
Well, and that also though points to that kind of process that Reground have about really deeply understanding the systems and the data that sort of sits within that original waste audit, I think, Alice. So then you've got that information in front of you around how much it is costing and the potential savings as well. Amazing. I'm just gonna there's some questions here around short-term residents, Airbnb, some of those challenges around people who are sort of not necessarily there for a long time. So how do you set up systems in those kind of environments when it's not necessarily owners and people who are wanting to do the right thing from that perspective?
Yeah, definitely. It's a super challenging one, and it's something that I know that we're still trying to work out what is the best way to do this. I guess the starting tips would be, one, making sure that your waste room is really user-friendly. So like I said, it seems small, but having color alignment, bins placed correctly, having things like a sorting table, making that all really clear so it looks like a really respected place. So when people come in, they also have that same level of respect. But also we put together for apartment buildings like information flyers. So you might have one in your Airbnb, for example. It's like, hey, having that personalized aspect, like for example, us at the Rochester, we want to have these goals for our building to divert waste from landfill. These are the different streams you have available. This is what can and can't go into each one. So we have the images of what can and can't all listed out. And then I think making sure that your internal bin setup is really easy to use, and also all labeled so that it matches the setup that is in the waste room, I think would be my starting tips. I totally understand when people come in, they might not engage with that entirely, but having that all available would be my first step.
Yeah, great. I'm conscious of the time. There's just one last question. I think, Brett, you started to talk about this a little bit, like how people can use Returnr in an apartment context where you might not have somewhere safe to leave containers and those sorts of things. How are you kind of currently managing that? Has it been an issue? How's it all working?
It hasn't been a real issue so far, and we're managing it in a really soft way. So when we first launched, we launched sort of at the tail end of COVID, and basically everyone was home, so it wasn't a problem then at all. And then what we've basically done since then is in some buildings where we can, where there's a place that's either a private area or there's a position where we can sort of put an order, in a certain location, we do that and drop it for the customer. And usually what we do is we do talk to the customers and try to get a sense of, where we can leave things. And then in the cases where, and there are some of these buildings where there just really is no option, like as in we can't even get access to the common area. Like there might be a locked door, you can't get access to even the common areas unless someone buzzes you in. We basically have to liaise with the client and make sure that we're delivering at a time when someone's home.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're running, as I mentioned earlier, we run our own vans with our own drivers, and each day that we do deliveries, we plan the routes ourselves, so we can sort of add in that little bit of extra. Like we know Sally's order has to be right at the end of the day, or whatever the case may be, and then the drivers get really familiar with each different building and all the quirks of that particular scenario. So it's definitely, it's one of those things where it's super complex, and every building's a bit different. Every customer's a bit different, so you've just got to be flexible to be able to adapt to those sort of complexities, really.
And I can speak to Returnr being really responsive and actually returning I accidentally left all my the bags for all your fruit and veg in the bottom of the Returnr bag, and they were very dutifully returned to me the following week.
Oh, nice.
So they're incredibly, your team's incredibly responsive in that sort of thing. That's
I'll pass that on to Joe and the guys and let them know.
I am so sorry we haven't been able to get to all the questions. I just noticed Alice has popped a note about that as well. In terms of wrapping up, obviously we've got the highlight. So Reground's going to be at the High Life Expo. They're one of the exhibitors in our supplier showcase. So if you've got more questions for Alice, you should come along to the High Life Expo on the Saturday, the 1st of June, and I'll pop that up in a minute. But and we might even just see if we can do a few email responses as well and send that out in the summary from the workshop, because there's quite a few questions there. But thank you both so much for that discussion. It was an incredible discussion. I think we probably all agree we could have stayed online for a lot longer. None of my 13 questions I got to ask. So thanks to everyone so much for all your participation. In terms of wrapping things up, we thought we'd just also highlight the container deposit scheme, which has now come into place. We're starting to see a bit of discussion in the sector, and some apartment buildings are looking at that as an opportunity to collect containers, obviously, and then be able to use that as fundraising, whether it's for waste signage or party room, parties in the waste room. Then there's a lot of good opportunities to use that, any funding that you can actually pull together from the container deposit scheme. Just a note about the fact that we've talked a lot about, there's been quite a bit of conversation around private contractors, but quite a few apartment buildings also have council waste services. And the reality is that there's different services no matter what, depending on which municipality you're in. So making sure that you're kind of on the website, having a look at what's happening in your particular municipality, and sort of understanding what's available in that context is also an important part of the puzzle. And then we wanted to highlight that these councils in particular have tailored information for apartments on their website. So if you're in any one of these municipalities, Marybeck, Port Phillip, Yarra, Melbourne, Sonnington or Darebin, you're lucky. And they're thinking about apartments as a really specific cohort of their community who need tailored information, which is, as we know, the whole reason we're putting on the High Life Expo. So we just wanted to highlight that. Felt like an important conversation. But wait, as you know, there is definitely more. So the High Life Expo itself is on Saturday, the 1st of June. Many of you have probably already registered for that. We are, I think, getting close. I think we're about 90% of the way booked at the moment. So, but there's a huge plethora of topics that are going to be covered across that High Life Expo that are obviously specific to apartments. But then there's 2 other online sessions that we'll be holding after the Expo on the Saturday, the 1st of June. That's at the RACV City Club in Melbourne, just so you know. You can register for any of those via the QR code there on your screen. We'll certainly pop the link in the chat as well. And just in terms of wrapping up, We have got an evaluation running across the whole High Life Expo. You go into the draw to win a $150 voucher at Mabu Mabu, amazing First Nations owned business that where you can either go in and eat, which is incredible food, or if you're not in Melbourne and you can't get into the CBD, there is an online store as well. So you can actually buy some food from there, and you'll also win a copy of the My Efficient Electric Home Handbook, which is also being launched, well, sort of, it will be available for pre-sale at the High Life Expo. Please feel free to use the QR code there or jump onto the link to fill up. There's only 3 questions. It's a very easy way to potentially win a dinner for 2, which would be lovely. I think that is everything. Let me just check. And then that is everything. And I just wanted to say Nungudjan, which means thank you in Wurundjeri Woiwurrung language. It's been a really great discussion tonight. So thanks so much, everyone. And I've finished 2 minutes over time. My apologies. Thanks, Alice. And thanks so much, Brett. Really appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.